Hello, it's Jack Tutor here of Attention Magazine. Welcome to Crucial Listening, the podcast where I speak to musicians and sound artists about the 3 records that are important to them. My guest this time is Jessica Moss, a Montreal-based violinist who's best known for her work in Silver Mount Zion, but she released an album earlier this year called Pools of Light on Constellation Records, and it's incredible. I've been having the best time digging into that over the past few months. I also had my experience of that record seriously enriched by seeing Jessica perform the first half of the album called Entire Populations live at Supersonic Festival in Birmingham. She was amazing, and it was so nice to see that track assembling itself in real time. Actually, at Supersonic Festival, she also performed with Lani Akia, who are a supergroup, I'm going to say, completed by Daniel O'Sullivan and Massimo Pupillo. They were amazing. They've just recorded an album which should be coming out soon, hopefully. And if it's anything like the live performance, that's going to be awesome. So Jessica was so much fun. I really enjoyed this conversation. Go check out Jessica's music on jessicamoss.net and please enjoy this conversation. And so without further ado, here's my conversation with Jessica Moss for Crucial Listening. Hello, Jessica Moss. Welcome to Crucial Listening.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here.
Now, you've had what seems like a busy summer from the outside, a pretty awesome summer, kicking off, I guess, with your album release in May. Was it early May?
Mm-hmm, yep. And
then coming over to the UK and playing a whole variety of shows, one of which I saw at Supersonic, which was amazing. How's it been? How have you found the past few months since the album release?
I'm going to use the most typical word here and say it's been a whirlwind, but it really does feel like a whirlwind. I feel like I'm just like, what? Okay, am I doing this right? I don't know. I feel totally. It seems strange that after so many years of being part of record releases, that so much of releasing a record would be new to me. But being solo is just. There's so many things that are different. So I do feel like, in some ways, a novice, even though in some ways a veteran. And all the parts that I'm learning for the first time, I just have to be doing it fast and on the run. And I don't know, I couldn't be more pleased and feel more grateful with how everything has gone, actually. So it was not ever my intention to do solo stuff. So the fact that I'm here now having this conversation is it just never ceases to amaze me and make me feel like, wow, I'm just so lucky. It's not even funny. That's how I feel.
Because I guess maybe this is true of some of your previous collaborations, but with solo, I imagine the logistics of going from having a record and being like, right, okay, let's now make this a performance, or I have to confess, I don't know which way around you did it, but it sounds like you kind of composed the constituent elements of the album and then used some, threaded them together in the studio. But
well, actually, it isn't quite like that. You want to hear?
I do. Instead of hypothesizing, I could ask the person themselves.
Yeah, just text me. I'll let you know. It's funny because it's exactly half what you said and half the exact opposite. The first half of the record, Entire Populations, I conceived of, I don't say wrote, because I don't actually write anything, because I don't actually know how to do that. So most of the time that I'm playing or making things up, I don't actually have a clue what note I'm playing or anything like that. It's all like by my ear and by my mind. But Entire Populations was conceived of in that way. I mean, I composed it, quote unquote, in the jam space, and I created it as a piece to perform from beginning to end far before I ever recorded it. So I was performing it before I recorded it. So it's something that I could play from. Well, you saw it. Oh, wait, did I play that one at Supersonic?
Yeah.
I think I did. Anyway, so that existed before pre-record. And it was the sort of third major long piece that I had, quote unquote, written like that. So when I went to the studio, I basically broke it up into pieces so I could get a best version of it. Because one thing about doing things the way I do things is that it's never perfect, because there's always some kind of unknown factor being thrown up from the pedals that I use, or the atmosphere, or the lights, or whatever. There's always something going on that sort of changes the piece from night to night. But so in the studio, I made a perfect, quote unquote, version of it. On the other side, Glaciers, I did sort of make as I composed elements in editing. So I had all these different pieces, and I knew what I was meant to be communicating, and I knew I wanted to write love songs to melting glaciers. That's how I think of them. And I sort of gathered all these things that I had, all these little pieces that I had put into the world, that I gathered them back in and created a landscape that way. So one half yes, one half no. And Glaciers to this day has only been performed twice live, and I did it with my sister here in Montreal. Actually, she's also a beautiful musician, and I got her to play it because there's so far too many elements for me to figure out how to perform properly live. So I think I will, though. I'm working on how to do it solo for next tour.
How did it work out as a collaboration? Were you happy with the result of playing that live?
So happy, because I also kind of almost like the solo work that I kind of accidentally fell into and then couldn't stop doing. I kind of accidentally fell into making a video to accompany the second half of the record. So I worked for like kind of weeks like a maniac on this video editing program that I was learning as I went, so that I could do exactly this thing I had in my mind. And so the launch shows that I did in Montreal, Toronto, and New York involved this. Actually, I didn't use it in New York, but in Montreal, Toronto, I had this video, and I had my sister perform with me, and I couldn't have been happier. My sister and I have sort of played music in parallel ways for most of our lives, but we've only truly collaborated one time. We had a short-lived band, which it was really good, in my opinion. And then she moved away from the city. Right as soon as we finally figured out our perfect collaboration, she left Montreal for a few years. So anyway, so yes, of course, it was wonderful to play with her, and I hope I get to do it again. And all in all, I've been really extremely surprised and pleased by how well performing has gone as solo, and also those two times as a duo.
And I guess you've kind of been now living with this material for so long. I mean, I see as well you're still performing now, and I see as well you're coming back over to Europe as well next month. Do you feel differently about it? It sounds like, as you said, it changes from night to night, but overall, how has your relationship with the material progressed?
That's a nice question, actually. I mean, I guess because I've been playing in bands forever, like I'm very familiar and even, let's say, skilled at sort of finding new love for pieces that you play night after night after night. You know, like touring has been part of my life for so long, and touring often means performing the same material for long periods of time. And in my main band, Mount Zion, maybe similarly to what I have find myself making. There's so many sort of ins and outs and so many moments to be involved in a way, if that makes sense. It never becomes rote. That rote as in R-O-T-E. I don't know if that translates if I say it out loud. But yeah, it never becomes something that just is what I'm doing, you know? It's always something I'm involved with, sort of something I'm grappling with. And sometimes, like at Supersonic, you probably don't know this because nobody usually knows this, but like there was a moment in that particular show where like my toe touched the wrong tiny part of one of my pedals, and it like gave me something that I'd never heard before, and I had to sort of battle it down. That's how I imagine it, sort of like taking it and being like, okay, here you are, you know, and like I've got all this live looping going on, and then there's this thing that's like there, and I have to sort of creatively figure out how to, you know, subtly deal with it and put it back in where, you know, where it came from so that I can continue the story I'm telling. So these things happen kind of regularly. So there's always like a kind of terrifying element. And there's also always, like, I'm never in front of an audience feeling anything but a very gigantic respect and relationship to the people in that room. Like, I don't ever take it for granted, first of all, and I don't ever take it lightly. And every time if I'm able to raise my eyes from the crazy shit I'm doing down on the floor, and I see that somebody's there listening, I think, like, I can't even believe, like, it's just so amazing to me to be sharing space like that. And I know it's not the most probably business friendly aspect of me, but I really enjoy playing really small shows with people that I can actually feel like we're really involved in something together. And so that's a very long-winded answer to your question. What's my relationship with it? My relationship with it is that I still love to tell these stories that I made, and they really do sort of depend on the evening. And sometimes it's much harder. Sometimes it's much more, sometimes it flows. Sometimes it's like exciting. Sometimes things happen I don't expect. Sometimes it goes perfectly and I can't even believe it because it happens so rarely. So anyway, it never becomes just something I'm doing. That's, I guess, the short version of it.
It was so great to see you at Supersonic, and I loved the room. I think was awesome to see you in as well, because it was one of those where there wasn't an elevated stage, and being able to see what you were doing and see this piece, 'cause for me, like, the music, you feel the process happening and the assembly happening, but to see it as well was like, oh wow, it felt really special.
That's so cool. That makes me so happy to hear. That's all I could dream of having it be feeling, you know, is if it somehow feels like, if you can witness the process and also be in it, that's, as an audience, you know, I feel like, you mean myself as an audience, that's my favorite thing about being somewhere, is just watching somebody. It's like conjuring, you know, like watching somebody who really cares and is really trying, and that this sort of other thing happens when the combined of the performer and the audience, like, elevates it, you know? Yeah.
As well, to go through that process, and then I looked in the program, and I'd seen, I might get the pronunciation wrong, feel free to jump in, but I'd seen Lania Kia on the lineup, but I wasn't familiar with who was involved, and then I read the blurb, and I was like, oh, hang on, that's like a super group. And Jess is playing again, like, oh man. So that was a wonderful surprise as well, because I wasn't aware of the fact that you were a collaborating trio of people. Like, I wasn't aware of any of those lines, so that was just like that was great. And then the performance was wonderful.
That's so nice.
I understand you're recording an album. How did that go?
Oh my God. So wonderful. I guess I've been solo now for quite a long time, which has been amazing, and so much to learn and so much to, you know, there's a lot. There's never a dull moment, which is another stupid platitude, but it's very true. But to then be back in a recording studio with two of my favorite people was like, heart burst. It's so beautiful. And in the studio is so, I don't even know how to describe it. It's in the middle of like a farmer's field, basically, in Wales. Studio is owned by Paul Sandra, and he is like, he's like one of those people who just can transmit. No, that's not the right word. He channels good creative energy. That's what I should say. He just sits there, and then good things can happen. And anyway, it was wonderful.
Oh, great. I can't wait to hear the output of that. I mean, I interviewed Massimo, I think, a couple of years back, and I was raving about that conversation for days, because I think it was a lot of...
Oh, yeah. He's so good to talk to.
Man, I mean, I get the feeling that he could have talked for a long time about his experiences with the shamans, and I could have asked, a million questions. But yeah, so wonderful.
Yeah, he's one of the best. One of my favorite peoples in the world.
So we should move to the main portion of Crucial Listening, Jessica, which is, all right, as always, I ask my guests to pick 3 albums that they consider to be important. Now, one thing I'm intrigued to know is how you found the process of picking those important records, and whether there was any particular, I guess, tact you took for considering these records important.
Well, let's see. I initially find lists and favorite things so intimidating that my first reaction to, like, I can't do that. I just can't do that podcast. There's no way. Nothing that I have to say is important enough to consider 3 best or 3 most important. So I almost didn't do it. I was like, nope. That's the name of the game now. Engaging in challenges, and for me it's very challenging to pick 3 things. So I just sort of was like, okay, chill out. It doesn't have to be your favorite records. There's no such thing as my favorite records. It doesn't have to be, it's very specifically worded as important. So 3 important records, and then I thought, well, should I talk about them now, the 3 records themselves?
You absolutely can, yeah.
Well, so let's see. I'm just going to think of maybe I can be long-winded. Let me think of a not long-winded way of saying. I picked the violin concerto, the Sibelius violin concerto, because it's probably the piece of classical. I know it's not actually classical technically, but fuck that. Of classical music that I've listened to most, probably, and I fell in love with it like hard in my teens, I guess. And after having been making solo stuff for a while, whatever it is that I'm doing on violin, whatever it is that I'm making, I feel like I learn what I'm doing after I've already done it, as opposed to going in there with really an intention. And after I have done all this stuff, I look at it and I think, clearly, like, my way of expressing myself and telling a story is influenced by listening to things like violin concertos, because they are not confined to repeating a verse or a chorus. They're not confined to anything, really. I mean, they are, in that there's usually 4 movements, and there's a lot of that I just sort of can put aside, because I'm obviously not going to be part of that, as I don't know enough about it. But you can sort of talk in a concerto kind of way. You can go places, and I guess that I have that in my blood somehow, or something, that I can talk, that I want to talk like that in long sentences, as opposed to patterns that already exist, if that makes sense. And I guess that the Sibelius one is so descriptive, like it's such a story to me, and I think I really identify with that kind of expression, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that one came as I was like, okay, well, how can I explain, I have, in my life, I've listened to probably more classical music than anything else, even though I don't listen to it much anymore. The time when I was growing most as a musician, I probably listened as much to classical as anything else. And it's part of my childhood, and so it's really in me,
So, do you remember when you first heard it, or where? I mean, do you recall your initial experiences of hearing it as a teenager?
No.
You don't?
I do not. I don't. I remember listening to it like over and over and over again. I don't know where. Who I have no idea. I don't know how I encountered it for the first time. It's probably actually nothing special. I mean, I listened because I played violin when I was a kid, so I had a lot of violin in my life, violin music in my life. I probably heard it at some point and didn't sort of clue into how much I felt from it until I chose it again later, like that's when I rejected a lot and just kept a few things. And that's one of the things I kept. I think it's more like that.
Right. I mean, it's interesting you talk about the impression, I guess, that music like this has on your own relationship with quote unquote writing music and making your music.
Yeah.
As I was listening to, I mean, obviously throughout today doing research for this, I've been listening back to your album, and also I was listening to this, and my experience with violin concertos is very scarce, so maybe this is
good.
just...
No, that's great. I'm so glad you could. This is a very good one to listen to. Isn't it beautiful?
It's gorgeous. And do you know what as well? I think probably a lot of what I was really enamored with is probably stuff that's just inherent to the format of violin concertos. So just the fact that...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you had like that shrinkage of... you had 2 to 3 minutes of just like pure violin solo, and then suddenly just a split second where the whole orchestra comes in and it expands to that panoramic range, and then it just shrinks again. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. I know. It's like, no, totally. I mean, he was like, I don't know, something about the way he wrote it. There's something so expressive, and in some ways, yes, it's inherent too, but it's also... something special about this one, I find, is exactly that, the relationship between the solo voice and everybody else, and it's like a conversation in a sort of very particular and special way, I find.
There's some bits as well, like these upward sort of, I don't know if arpeggiative is the right word, but like
I don't either.
We'll go with it then.
Okay.
Where it reminded me of the first refrain of Pools of Light, just this sudden like sweep upward, with a sort of quite a vigorous as well bow, where you get the bite at the beginning and in quite a pronounced and quite raw way. I was like, just listening to the works side by side, I was like, that my ears pricked up as soon as I heard it. I was like, that reminds me of that.
That's so cool. And like I said, like I don't know if it's some kind of subconscious mechanism that I have, but I really don't know that stuff until later. I really don't find it, and then I'm like, oh shit. I was totally influenced by this. But had you asked me at the time, like, what are you working with? Like, what are your ideas? I would have said, I have no idea. I'm just doing what is in me. I don't actually have any idea what this sounds like. I don't know anyone else who's doing anything like this. Like, I'm not trying for something. I'm just doing the only thing I seem to be able to do, which is exactly this,
Yeah.
And then later realize, okay, there's definitely parts of that, I definitely have it in me. So yeah, it's cool. But that's nice if you hear it like a little bit too. That's cool.
Have you heard anything else by this Gil Shaham at all?
Oh yeah, so right. I specified Gil Shahan because there's something about the way that he plays that I really relate to. There are some violinists that, I don't know, some are more strident, some are more soft, some like to be more tough, some like to be, and so you can actually really prefer or not prefer the way people play certain things. And so I've heard Sibelius played by many other violinists and preferred it less to the way that he does. But actually the first time I was introduced to him was because I was listening to Arvo Pärt, Tabula Rasa. And so he has a recording of that. And I considered putting that as the record instead of the Sibelius, but I know the truth is I've listened to the Sibelius 26 million times, and the Arvo maybe only 1 million times. So I knew it was more true in a way, but I was just like swept, and there's something about the way that he plays, and then I actually, as I was finding you a link for this, I noticed that he has a recording where he does, I think that he refers to them as Hebraic melodies. I'm not exactly sure. I just kind of passed it by and I was like, oh yeah, of course. Maybe that's part of what I relate to. Like he knows he must be Jewish and he must know about Jewish violin music, which is also in me and definitely influences and informs where I come from as a maker of music. So I think it's possible that I related to that without even knowing it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad as well you sent across a video as well, because that was great to watch. I find the conduct of classical, not classical, fuck it, as you say.
We don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah. The whole conduct is like very specific and really interesting, and I mean, he's clearly giving it some, you know, like and then I found a later video of him, which maybe was in the past few years, and he's just the most jovial guy, just smiling at the audience and the conductor, like just seems
so sweet,
so endearing. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's nice. Yeah, no, it's funny actually. I kind of knew what he looked like, but when I was going through how to send it to you, I thought I that's how I found it, and then I looked, I was like, oh, I even can relate to that a little bit. He's sort of like all scrunched up in his face. Like he's not really a performer. He's not a virtuosic performer. He's more like he's just furrowed brow and sort of, I could relate to that.
I'd love to hear your second pick.
There's this very particular type of music that I discovered very, very early on in Mount Zion touring. There's a record store in Paris that we used to always get super excited to go to because this was everything always is on the internet, so you never have to look for anything. So we would go to this record store because they would put out like rare recordings from music around the world. And at the time, that was not something you could access very well. It was like very early 2000s. And we picked up a few records this one time, and one of them was a compilation of Balkan folk music, and one of them was this record, which is of Albanian folk music, specifically Southeast Albanian folk music. And I debated again with which one to give, because the compilation has so much beautiful music on it, and this is just one particular strain of what I was exposed to at that time. But can you believe what that record is called? I had to put this, first of all, because of what it's called. Cry You Mountain, Cry You Fields, so beautiful.
Yeah.
And also because really, like, of all the things that I heard sort of for the first time in those early days of touring, the thing that sort of grabbed me and by the throat was this Albanian style of it's called, I don't know if I'm going to say it right, I'm going to try. It's called iso-polyphonic singing, and it's a style of very close harmony singing that I think quite a few folk musics from the region make use of, but and I'm really not a musicologist, and I'm really not good at remembering particulars, so I'm not even going to try. But I know there's like choral groups from all over that region that sort of utilize this really close harmony singing. But the melodies that the Albanian folk music used and the way they sang it, I should have included a video on that. Actually, I will send you a video after we talk, because there's a few videos of that kind of performance that's like just shows you they sort of have to stand really, really close together. And I mean, on this record that I sent, there's all sorts of different types of music, but I'm just going to only talk about the choral music. All the music is extremely beautiful, and all the music uses scales that I don't understand, but I find so magical and different from other things. Anyway, the way that the harmony singing and the types of, I wish I had better language. Anyway, I feel like the groups, they're together, and then there's drone singers, and then there's sort of melody singers, and the drone singers hold this very like beautiful, almost desperate drone, and the melody singers have this, I feel like they sing and then they fall down in the melody, and then they come back, and it's like tumbling down, and I don't know. I just find it so beautiful and moving, and to watch them sort of huddled together to catch each other's incredible, like, minutia subtlety of where their voices go, and just traditional music in general, I find probably the most beautiful in the world, just to think about how it gets passed and how it's sort of part of community gatherings, and you pass it on, and I don't know. So I don't really have any particular relationship to Albania that I know of till I do my DNA test. Who knows? But I don't know. I find it some of the most beautiful music I've ever heard, and it sticks with me. I don't listen to it that often anymore, but I think that I draw from it when I'm making my own things. I have that sort of idea that you can put notes so close together and they can just be like this soaring, beautiful thing, you know?
Absolutely. I mean? Yeah, I do you know what? Maybe before you sent it through to me, I wouldn't have known, but now I totally know, because this was amazing. Like I've had such a good time, and will continue to have such a good time. Yeah. And I'm glad your focus is centered on the choral stuff, because I think that's really what struck me as like, oh man, I wish I knew the names of the pieces, but there's one I've listened to so many times, and
that's so cool. You're so happy.
But there's this like harmony where the lower note is sort of holding a fixed position, and then the upper one, I wish you could see my hands. I'm doing what it was doing with my hands, but it's like closes down on top of that note and becomes it, and it's like, my word! It just
exactly. No, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Yes, that's exactly the moments I'm talking about. It's like it like blew my mind, and exactly that thing of like this. I'm now doing it with my hands too. Well, anyway, anyone hearing this, go listen, and you can do it with your hands too. You'll know what we mean for sure. For sure, yeah, that's it. But that's it. Those are the moments, and I just like it brings me to tears, or close anyway. Just thinking, it's just there's so much mourning, you know, in that kind of singing, but also so much sort of beautiful hope in ensembles, basically, you know, so like being together and making this thing together, and yeah, it's really the best.
And I imagine as well, just like technically, just I think particularly where we're amidst the tradition where things run in parallel, I guess, a lot of the time, just holding a particular note, or just having a frame of harmonic reference that does that? I mean, it just seems like, I mean, I just thought, well, I'm not a singer, but if I was to try that, I'd be all over the place. It's a really complex thing.
Exactly. It's technically, you have to be doing that for years before you can be one of those people. That's another thing that's so cool about some traditional music is how serious it is, You
mentioned there may have been other records you could have picked from this particular time where this music was featuring quite heavily in your life. Was there anything else? This is, I guess, more of a selfish question. That's like an avenue for me to where to go next,
It's funny because last night I was looking for the original compilation that we got on that tour, and I haven't yet, but somewhere in the basement exists this CD because I couldn't figure out how to Google it. So maybe by the end of this day, I'll go and see if I can find it, and I'll send you it, and you can put it up, and I'll have ideas.
Amazing.
But no, there's so much beautiful. But actually, if you want, you Google that iso-polyphonic, ISO, and then dash polyphonic singing, and you'll get all sorts of things. Albanian and Georgian, and there's a lot there.
If I could have your final pick, Jessica, that'd be wonderful.
Yes. It's like a rare, little-known artist named PJ Harvey. No, you know why I picked that one? Actually, I could have gone to a different part of the world. I could have found us talking about another thing like what we were just talking about. But the reason I picked that actually is because I don't know if this is common knowledge, but there's some brain research that suggests that things that make a big influence on you musically, like just culturally, things that mean a lot to you between the ages of 18 and 25, or the things that basically continue to mean a lot to you for the rest of your life. Like you never have a relationship with art or music or literature the same that you do in those years. And it's kind of weird to think about that because it's true for most people. Like if you ask them, but what's your favorite band? They'll pick something from within that time period usually. Or what's your favorite book? Or when people are like, oh, in my time, they used to blah, blah, blah. It's usually things from that period.
Yeah.
Something about the brain at that time. So the reason I'm bringing it up is I definitely had that where I just sort of was hanging on to things in some ways, not even hanging on, but I had filled up, at a certain point. I'd filled up of things that I love, and I stopped actively searching the same way that you do it in those years, as I think a lot of people do, which is completely fine, but it just is what it is. But the first thing that sort of made me feel that way again after a long time was that record, Let England Shake. It was the first record that I listened to a million times, and when I say the first record, I mean the first sort of in the sphere, like in pop. You don't call it pop. What do you call PJ Harvey? Who knows? PJ Harvey.
Yeah.
She's in the world. She'll be reviewed in a magazine. You know what I mean? Like the first sort of music like that, that I had been beyond stuff that I sort of was close to me for other reasons. It was like the first thing in the world in a very, very long time that I was so excited by, and I just thought I loved it in the way that I've loved records before, but I heard things in it that I hadn't heard, but I was so excited to be hearing. Just the way, her choices of moving from one chord to another, the choices of, and I know it's not just her. I know that part of the thing is that she chooses incredible collaborators, and you can hear it. but just like where she let her voice go, what she was singing about, the fact that she was singing about her country and how she felt about it was so literal in some ways, and she let the music be like kind of beautiful in a very simple way, but then also at other times challenging in a really complicated way and overlaying things on top. I don't know. There's a lot about that record. And I actually believe, to be honest, the one that she just did, the Hope 6 one, or whatever it's called, Demolition Project, had I heard that at the exact same moment, I might have felt the same way about it. I don't hear it. When I listen to it now, I'm like, nah, it's not as good. Nothing's as good as Let England Shake. Although I have loved PJ Harvey from the beginning. I don't know if it's just where I was at that time, but I think like there's something about that record that's really magical. And still when it comes on, I get really happy and want to sing. It just inspired me that things in the world can still be that exciting. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you recall with this one where you first heard it, or how?
I definitely remember Ephraim, who always heard everything before me, was like, I think he was like, really thought I was going to love it. And so I definitely, when somebody you love plays something for you, you're definitely listen to it with those kind of ears. Like if somebody had said, I really think you're going to hate this. I don't know what kind of ears I would have heard it for the first time, but I listened to it in the spirit of, somebody I love thinks I will love this. I will be completely open,
Yeah.
To be fair, sometimes I would be presented with, you're going to love this. And I'd be like, ooh, I really don't love it. So it's not that I'm not extremely discerning, which I am. I don't love like that very, very often at all. But so it was presented to me, which was a very nice way to hear it for the first time, is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, this is a really interesting record, I think, to rehear for me, because it got recommended to me maybe about, 2 years ago by someone who...
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And it wouldn't have been an album. I don't think I would have, found otherwise. But my friend was just like, I listen to it all the time. There's not a time at which I think is inappropriate for me to listen to this.
Yeah, totally.
Is that what you have as well?
I haven't listened to it in years, but that's because I listen to it so much. And so now it just sort of exists in me. And I can hear like one note of one of the songs, and then I can hear the whole album in my head. So I don't actually need to listen to it anymore in a way. But just today, just before we spoke, I was like, what? And then I just sort of skipped. I just put on one song in the middle. And it's like, yeah, no, I fucking love this record. I love the choices, where everyone is sitting. I mean, where the instruments are sitting in space, which instruments are chosen to translate that feeling and that chord and that,
Yeah,
it's a very big part of it.
Well, because I was reading about it today, and I understand that she just kind of went and was like, I've got these chord changes, and I don't know the instruments that I really want to play them. And so
yes,
the fact that all of that was, relatively spontaneous is pretty remarkable, but I guess probably quite, informative as well.
I think so. There's something in there. Like to me, there's some kind of magic in there that is like beyond the recording practice or something like that. Like it sounds really good. The drums sound really good, like it's recorded beautifully, but there's definitely some kind of looseness or some kind of spirit of like, whoa, are we really going to do this? Okay, we're going to do it here. We're doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like they worked on it for 2 years. It sounded like, well, let's try using a trombone here. Okay. And so that's why I think, picking collaborators is a large part of why that record is so good, is who is there to sort of take those chords and take those ideas and elevate them in that sort of odd way. It doesn't sound like anything else.
No.
It sounds like a strange ensemble of weirdos, like an auto harp, which is, I think, one of the most horrible instruments, sounds so good. It's like perfect. Couldn't be anything else but the auto harp that she uses on that thing.
Yeah. And really, I think as well, like hearing it now, as a British person post, like
yeah.
So because there's a lot lyrically, a lot of like, fuck's sake, England. I want to
exactly.
love you. I can't. But also,
yes,
some of the more jarring instrument choices where, there's that on the third track, I can't remember the name, they got the fanfare that kind of comes in at 100% a different key to everything else.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
totally. And I'm just like, at the time I was like, okay, I kind of like hearing that because it's kind of wonky. But now I'm like, this feels so right that she's got something which has a certain, regal, patriotic edge that doesn't sit right now.
Exactly. No, that's exactly it. That's totally exactly it.
Yeah.
It's so emotive in that way. Exactly. And I think, that's anyway, blah, blah, blah. Exactly. That's all I have to say. Exactly. Exactly. That's part of why that record's so incredible is those choices, and why I really learned from it. I grew from it, or it actually became something really important, I think, as like what's possible within songs. What's possible to make a record that still has the normal amount of songs, it's still the normal size, still a vinyl, there's still there's nothing on the surface about it that's unique, but there's so much unique within that structure.
Do you have this could be a easy question or a torturous one, but do you have a favorite track?
Probably it's a boring answer, but I feel like I have different favorites depending on how I'm listening or when I'm listening, or if I haven't listened in a long time and I hear one for the first time, I was like, oh, that's the one. And then,
right.
So no, I don't actually have favorite tracks. I love them all. That's the truth.
No, fair. I
have favorite moments in tracks, but I don't have a favorite in single track.
I think one that's got me going back into this record is All and Everyone, I think, mainly because I think out of like remembering that record from last time I heard it, the one thing I was aware and waiting for is how the brass comes in right at the end.
Yes.
And it's a pretty gloomy thing to begin with.
Yes.
And then it settles and it's okay, but you know what I mean?
Of course I do.
Silly question.
I know exactly what you... No, it's not silly. It's a wonderful question because it's so nice. I do know exactly what you mean, and that makes me happy. Yes, exactly. It's really beautiful, that record.
And it was recorded in Dorset as well, which is where I lived up until about 4 months back, which is quite nice.
Oh no shit. Okay.
Yeah, it's a really nice place. So again, it's framed in that way, which is, I'm going to listen to this a lot more now. Basically, I think is good. That's what I'm saying.
Good.
So
no, it's a really, really good record to listen to a lot. That's the beautiful thing. It's like there's so much to discover.
Well, Jessica, this has been really awesome. Thank you so much for sharing these records with me and for sharing a good hour with me as well. People want to find out what you're up to. Where's the best place for them to be headed?
Well, let's see. I have a website, although I'm not the best at updating it, but it has all the tour dates on there. So that's my name, .net. And also the Facebook, which I think is Jessica Moss Music, I think. It's anyway, I'm very findable. Constellation Records has my tour dates and stuff, news, blah, blah, blah. It's not so hard. It's not so hard to find me in places.
Great. I'll include all of that in the show notes. And to... Cool. Everyone listening, thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.